Good morning, fellow councillors, officers and members of the public. Welcome to South Kesteven District Council Planning Committee on Thursday, the 3rd of June 2021. As far as I'm aware, there is no practice fire drill taking place today, so if the alarm goes off, please vacate the building and meet at the front of the building. We have Anita today taking the minutes, Martha as our legal advice, and Shelley looking after the microphones and helping with those who wish to speak. Please indicate if you wish to speak by raising your hand nice and high so we can see you. I would just like to remind people that when using the microphones, there is a couple of seconds delay, so please just wait. Also, a reminder that this meeting is being streamed live via YouTube, so please think before you speak. Public speakers, please be aware that you have 3 minutes to speak. Shelley will let you know when you have 30 seconds left. You may finish your sentence but not carry on with another paragraph. The agenda was printed before the change of chairman, so Councillor Bob Adams is no longer the chairman, but it is myself, Helen Crawford. Right, we will start with the agenda. Membership, apologies and absence.
Madam Chairman, thank you. We have apologies from Councillor Judy Smith, and Councillor Cottier was supposed to be subbing for her, but he hasn't arrived yet. We have apologies from Councillor David Bellamy, apologies from Councillor Phil Dilks, and Councillor Ashley Baxter is substituting for him. Apologies from Mike Exton, and Councillor Judy Smith is substituting for him. I've received no apologies yet from Councillor Rosemary Caby-Brown. Councillor Penny Milnes has sent apologies, but we have no substitution. Councillor Charmaine Morgan has sent apologies, and Councillor Robert Reid has sent apologies. Those are all the apologies and substitutions.
Lovely, thank you very much, and thank you for those who are substituting as well. Item 2 on the agenda, disclosure of interests. Do I have any? And if you do think if you have some later on, then please make us aware. No, right, I just have one for item 9, as I brought that into committee. I am not a ward member for that area, but I will reserve my right to speak and vote on the item. Thank you. Right. Yes, Harish, Councillor Harish, proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Disclosure of interest, just of interest being a member of the Stamford Town Council, and I've been approached by some members with 2 applications concerning Stamford. So I come here totally with open mind.
Lovely, thank you. And so do I. Right. Item 3, minutes of the meeting that were held on the 12th of May 2021. Yes, Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. Relating to the minutes of the last meeting, there isn't any mention, I don't think, of the subsequent secret meeting that was held concerning the Kratos workshop. I wondered if there are any notes or minutes or action points from that workshop, which was held, I think, last week.
Well, those minutes, well, there weren't any minutes, there wouldn't be any minutes because it was a private meeting, so they certainly wouldn't come up on the planning meeting minutes of the 12th of May. Okay? Any other questions regarding the minutes? Yes, Councillor Selby.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chairman. Well, to be fair, that really wasn't related to the meeting that was the planning meeting, actually. So I don't think that was actually part of this, but I don't have a problem with these, Madam Chairman, so I'll propose it.
Lovely. Thank you. We have a proposer and a seconder. All those in favour, please show your hands then. Did you get those? No, sorry. Can you just raise your hands again so we can all see? Yes, because you were here for the meeting, but you could hear it, but you couldn't speak on things, could you? Because you had technical difficulties. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Could you just raise your hands again, please? So for those against, do we have any? And those abstaining? Thank you. We have two public speakers joining us today. For item 5, we have Kate Wood, and for item 7, we have David Turnock. I hope I pronounced that correctly. We are going to change the agenda very slightly. Item 4 will go after item 10, as we are missing a member of the committee who was there, so we can't actually proceed with that one because we wouldn't be for it. So we'll go straight on to application S20-2201, item 5. Proposal for the demolition of existing pavilion, erection of new sports centre, change of use of agricultural land to sports pitch, installation of 2 replacement sports pitches and floodlighting, and alteration to access. So could we have Phil to do the presentation, please?
It's on page 29.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and good morning, members. So this first item is S20-2201. It's already been introduced. It's the demolition of an existing sports pavilion, erection of a new sports centre, and installation of 2 replacement sports pitches and floodlighting. The site is opposite Stamford Junior School off Kettering Road in Stamford. And I've already been introduced as Phil Jordan. Is that better? That's okay. So the key issues for this application set out in the main agenda are the principle of development, the impact on the character of the area, impacts on the historic environment, considerations around residential amenity, highway and transport infrastructure, flood risk and drainage, ecology and biodiversity, and sustainability. So the site itself, as already introduced, is broadly to the south of Stamford. You can see on the screen in front there, Kettering Road runs out the southwest of Stamford, and on the site at the moment there is an existing all-weather hockey pitch as well as a small sports pavilion. This just shows the site, you know, in a bit more detail. So you can see you've got an existing single full-size AstroTurf pitch on the site, as well as that small sports changing pavilion. The site doesn't currently have any parking, and the access is off Kettering Road. There's a you might just be able to see where that white vehicle is on the screen there. There's a pedestrian crossing, which allows you to sort of safely cross Kettering Road, and then the existing parking arrangements are within the Stamford Junior School on the other side of the road. So this location plan, again, it just shows that layout as existing. You can see the land in blue to the north of the site. That's land in the same ownership. So the school facilities do extend across the other side of Kettering Road. And as I've already said, that's where the existing parking arrangements are. So just a few photos. You can see that existing access into the site and the small sports pavilion. Just to the right of the screen, you can make out the pedestrian crossing over Kettering Road. Looking towards the east, there's a consented development for 5 dwellings, which are nearly complete. That's the pedestrian crossing that I've spoke about. So the proposal itself, it largely retains the same uses on the site itself. And it's really all about increasing sports provision. So I know that the applicant's agent's going to speak and will likely go into more detail around how the need for this development's come about. But in short, the school have identified a need to increase sports provision, particularly for girls' sport, and that's led to this proposal. Elsewhere in the town, the school's got some new, very good sports facilities around the boys' school, but this provision itself is it's open to all, but it's particularly done with some of those girls' sports in mind, where they've seen some growth, and that's around the hockey. And then the pavilion itself allows for various indoor sports and exercise activities. So there's some studios in there and a gym. So what that increase means is to facilitate 2 pitches on the site, what's had to happen is the existing pitch is rotated 90 degrees, and then that allows 2 pitches to be laid out on the site. It does then encroach further to the south, and that involves the removal of a existing hedgerow. So part of the mitigation is this replacement planting to the south, and then there's a substantial sort of planting around the pavilion itself. Again, the proposed pavilion is largely on the same site as the existing one, but clearly it's a larger facility. That said, whilst it is a sort of fairly large in terms of footprint, it's been designed with this dual pitch roof to keep the overall height down. The materials proposed are sort of dark and largely recessive to again mitigate the visual impact of the development. And as I've already said, there's a detailed landscaping scheme been put forward, which we have conditioned further by the detail of which we've conditioned further. So here again, you can see some of the detail of the proposed landscaping. So you see this new substantial hedge to the south of the site. Much of this existing hedgerow to the frontage and to the west is retained. Again, there's quite a substantial existing buffer between those new residential development and the new pavilion. And then there is some additional trees proposed around the pavilion itself. So this just shows the floor plan. I won't dwell on this too long, but you can, it sets out where the studios are, the changing rooms, the gym, everything typical that you'd expect really of a large modern sports building. So the light spill, whilst there is an increase in, it's going from 1 pitch to 2 pitches, the applicant has demonstrated that there would be a reduction in light spill. Modern floodlights are very much designed to do the job they're intended to do, and that's to illuminate the pitches with very little backspill in the other direction. So what this diagram really shows on the screen there is that light yellow colour is where the illumination is focused clearly on the pitches. And then once you get into that blue area, you've got lux levels below sort of 2, which is, it's almost negligible in terms of any light spill. So you do get a small amount in front of the pavilion and around the periphery of the pitches, but once you go any further than sort of 5 or 6 meters away from the pitches themselves, you get very little light spill. So just a brief evaluation really, and this just summarises what's in the main agenda and additional items paper. There's an existing pavilion and pitch on the site already. The proposals to provide additional and enhanced sports facilities. There is a community use agreement which has been secured by condition, and that's a commitment from the school that these facilities would be available to the wider community as well as just the pupils of the school. So in policy terms, the principle of development is acceptable under those policies listed. That's the edge of settlement policy, the community facilities policy, and the open space policy. In terms of noise and light spill, there's no adverse impact on those adjacent residential properties. The access itself, there's some quite significant improvements in terms of the access to the site itself. They're set out in the main agenda. Clearly, there is some visual impact, an impact through the removal of that existing hedgerow to the south, but that's considered to be mitigated through the design of the building and the enhanced proposed replacement landscaping. The building itself and the floodlights are a very high quality, and there are, again, details set out in the main agenda of the sustainable approach to construction from the applicant. So the recommendation is to approve the application subject to conditions. Just to one of the things we're required to do now is to agree any what we call pre-commencement conditions, and that's conditions which require submission of details before development commences with the applicant. And that's been slightly further complicated in this instance because part of the site to the south goes into Peterborough City Council. And so there's been a bit of a kind of discussions between Peterborough City Council, the applicant, and ourselves in terms of agreeing the conditions. So the updated set of conditions are set out in the additional items paper, but I just wanted to run through just some minor amendments to the trigger points that we've agreed with the applicant since that was published. So the 18 conditions as set out remain the same in terms of what they're seeking to achieve. There are just some minor amendments which I just need to run through. So condition 1, which is the time commencement, remains the same. Condition 2, which is about approved plans and documents, we've just included the community sports agreement, the tree survey and arboricultural impact assessment, the ecological constraints report, and the noise assessment. And they're all documents that are referred to in later conditions. So just for completeness, they've been added to the approved plans list. In terms of the trigger points, condition 3 has been slightly changed to read, no development other than site clearance shall take place on each phase. Phase 1 being demolition, site clearance and sports pitch construction. Phase 2 being building and landscaping. And then the condition reads the same. And what that effectively does is it allows some site clearance to take place in advance of those details being submitted. And that's considered to be a reasonable change to that condition. And then it likewise follows a similar pattern. So where the other, if I go on to condition 4, which is about surface water drainage, that now reads no development other than site clearance and demolition. So effectively the drainage details are required to be submitted before any building works take place, but it does allow them to get on and clear the site and demolish the existing structures. Condition 5 is the same, so it changed to no development other than site clearance and demolition, and then it reads the same. Condition 6, again the same, no development other than site clearance and demolition until the archaeological investigation has been submitted and approved. And then condition 7 is amended to read, before any development is commenced other than site-specific clearance as defined below, and then goes on to read the same about biodiversity mitigation and enhancement. And then what it allows them to do, the site-specific clearance works are the demolition. So it excludes the demolition of the existing building and felling of the ash tree and the removal of the southern hedgerow. So that they were the 3 things which were highlighted as having ecological significance. And then condition 8 is just updated to where it reads, all existing trees shown on the approved plan. It's now explicit and says the approved tree survey, arboricultural impact assessment and method statement. And the remaining conditions read the same. So that's the end of the presentation, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Phil. Do I have any questions? Harish, Councillor Harish? Sorry, do apologise. I'm still training and learning. We're going to go to our next speaker and we're going to do questions to officer in the debate. Okay, so could I have the speaker on this one, which is Kate Woods, please? Thank you very much. And you have 3 minutes. If you come over here, where there's a microphone for you. Thank you very much. And Shelley will advise you when you have 30 seconds left. Okay. Yeah, and could you just wipe down the area with the wipes after you finish speaking? Thank you, because of darling COVID.
I will, thank you, Chairman. Oh, thank you, Madam Chairman, and thank you for that very comprehensive report. Stamford High School is a school for girls aged 13 to 18, but sports facilities for girls are limited to the current hockey pitch, shared use of the netball courts at the junior school opposite, and a small gym and changing room for 30 girls. The proposed development offers the opportunity to enhance sport and exercise for the school and for the wider community, but will be restricted by conditions to sporting, exercise and educational activities. The proposed floodlights will be of a modern design, and they will have less glare beyond the perimeter of the site, despite there being more lights themselves, and they will be controlled by planning condition to be switched off at 9 p.m. The new pavilion will be constructed to high standards of design and sustainability and enable changing for up to 100 people, as well as providing modern studio space for dance, yoga and fitness training. The site extends to the south, where it will be cut slightly into the slope of the land. And we will also be providing significant additional landscaping, as well as the replacement hedge on the bund that will form this new southern boundary of the site, and significant additional trees as well. Whilst it wasn't possible to hold a public exhibition prior to the submission of the application due to lockdown restrictions, the school itself undertook its own consultation process, contacting local political leaders, Wothorpe Parish Council, the Burley Estate, the Civic Society, Chamber of Commerce, and representatives of England Hockey and Sport England, as well as through its own newsletter and its website. Positive responses were received in support of upgrading the provision of hockey and other sports. I would just like to thank officers for their assistance at the pre-application stage, where we undertook extensive pre-application advice, including the design pad process. We have worked well with officers and have responded to issues that have been raised during the application, culminating in this positive recommendation and associated safeguarding conditions. The wording of the conditions is important to ensure that the facilities can be provided quickly in relation to school term times. Thank you. In relation to school term times. So we're particularly grateful for help to facilitate that early work to clear the site whilst the remaining technical issues are resolved. And so I commend the application to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And do we have any questions for our speaker? Thank you, Councillor Smith. It's Stephen, sorry, getting you confused with
Sorry,
the other
I don't know
Judy.
whether that mistake was made earlier, actually, in the, Anita might have made that mistake.
No, because
Did she?
Judy, no.
Right, okay. Sorry. I just was wondering about you mentioned Wothorpe Parish Council and consultation. They did mention, according to the notes here, that they were concerned about the sale of alcohol and the hours of operation. Do you foresee that as being an issue at all? Did you not hear me? I just mentioned that the Wothorpe Parish Council had mentioned the sale of alcohol and the hours of operation as being a cause for concern. I was just wondering if you shared that view or how that was being mitigated.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. There won't be any sale of alcohol because it's a school and so it's not expected to take place. The hours of use of the lights have been controlled by planning condition. The existing pavilion and existing hockey pitches have no control over their hours of use at all. So in a way, this introduces some additional control. But you may have seen that the school submitted a community use commitment as part of the application, and as part of that we've made it has been made clear that it's not for discos, let's put it that way. It's literally for education and sporting and exercise use, and you'll see that one of the planning conditions requires that as well and restricts it that way. And because it's restricted that way, I don't think you'll find that there will be problems that Wothorpe were concerned about. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Selby.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. You mentioned about the replacement, talking about the replacement hedge. You mentioned significant trees. Can you just give us an assurance that, well, hopefully it'll be an improvement upon what's already there? Can you just tell us what you're planning on putting in its place, please? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I'm so sorry, I don't have the landscaping scheme with me, so I can't be specific. But obviously some trees do need to be removed to facilitate the development. And Peterborough City Council has policies requiring the provision of more trees than are taken out. So under their half of the planning permission, assuming it's granted, we would be required to provide a lot more trees. You'll see that there are planning conditions requiring landscaping and the standard condition requiring replacement landscaping if any trees die or are damaged. So the protection is there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Baxter.
Thank you, Chair. I don't know if this is the right time to say that to avoid confusion, I have done some consultancy work for Stamford Endowed Schools in the past, nothing relating to this application, and I don't consider it to be a personal, let alone a pecuniary interest. Could you please tell me, if you know, are the pitches full size or a kind of junior size, and at what level of competition are they suitable for?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. They are full-size pitches in the sense that they facilitate club level use.
Sorry, through you, Chair. Competitive club level use.
I think so. I'm sorry, I don't know, sorry.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions? No? Thank you very much for attending. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman.
Right, we will go into debate now. Do we have any questions for the officer? Thank you. Councillor Bishnasing.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I have got 3 questions, but probably a very simple one. Will it be possible for you, Phil, to put the slides where you got the 2 pictures plus the pavilion showing behind with some trees coming up at the back of it? That one, no, there's another one that is slightly bigger showing the roads as well. That's the one, yes. Now, where the new pavilion is, it's my luck. All right. Thank you. Yeah, just behind the pavilion where there's a dark sort of a line, looks like that used to be an old gravel footpath, and alongside it, there was like a little rivulet with any water. I went back last night to have a look. It seems to me that little rivulet seems to have disappeared. Are you aware of it? It's gone because it's in between the other developments and this new one. It goes all the way up. I'm concerned about it because if the water, because there always used to be some water there, and I know been mentioned as could be in a flood zone category 3 possibility, but there's no domicile there, so LCC is not that worried about it. But I just wonder, especially if we're cutting back on the slopes of it slightly, it might disturb the water level. Where is that going to go? This is question number 1. Number 2, I think probably with regards to the design, I wonder we missed the climate change, the SB1, and the inclusion of solar panel. It's been ideal for this building with the size of the roof pitch. And, pardon? I don't think there is. And question number 3 is, could you please elucidate a bit more on the community sport agreements? What does that entail and how far can the community be involved?
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. In relation to flood risk, there's 2 conditions largely that sort of mitigate against surface water flood risk. My first point would be the site is in flood zone 1, which is the lowest risk of flooding. In terms of the specific water course that you mentioned, I'm not aware of what that is or where it is, but the surface water drainage scheme is secured by condition, which we would then discharge with the relevant drainage bodies. And then the construction management condition also requires interim drainage arrangement. So during development itself, there would have to be some temporary drainage arrangements in place. So I think there is, full control there in terms of surface water flood risk. In terms of sustainability, there's a section in the report which sets out the sustainability measures that were detailed in the design and access statement. The applicant has subsequently committed that those sustainability measures will be implemented during the build out. But again, those details require submission following a condition. So there's a whole sort of suite of things in there which ensure that the building's built to the highest sustainability levels. And the last point about community use, again, there's a bit of a balance here between ultimately this is a private school and the project is privately funded by the school. But that said, the school have made a commitment, and it's in a written community use agreement, which has been consulted on by Sport England, who are happy with the level of commitment. And really, it's without being specific about certain times and things like that, it's a commitment really from the school that they would make the facility available to the wider community. Clearly, they've got their own interests, in terms of the school use, and naturally that would take priority. But I think the school does already, where possible, and clearly it's, as well as the community benefits, it has commercial benefits for them as a school, make those facilities available to, community sports clubs, adult sports clubs, and so on.
Thank you. Do I have any other questions? Councillor Selby?
We are in the debate part of Madam Chairman. For me, there's a feel-good factor about this application. I really, really like it, I have to say. I like the idea of the improvement of the trees, the replacement edge. I like the idea of the community support agreement that Harris has mentioned, which was something which we discussed at the site visit. And for me, Team GB, the women's team, they're current Olympic champions, have won bronze twice. Let's encourage the youngsters to reach those heights. Why not in Stamford? Why not in our district? So I really, really like this. Big improvement on the site. I'm all for it, and I'm going to propose it, Madam Chairman. I'll propose the application.
Thank you very much. Next question, Councillor Stevens.
Yes, I would second that, actually, but also I'd like to say that in the discussions, it transpires that we're also benefiting here from the very robust policy that Peterborough have in terms of tree replacement. So they require 2 trees for 1 removed. Is that what was said? Sorry.
Yeah, I don't know the detail of it. I think it's that it certainly ensures that for every tree removed, there has to be at least an increase, a replacement and an increase. And that has been a really, it's been a positive experience working with Peterborough on that. And, certainly our policies push towards retention of trees and, generally improving landscaping, but they have got this explicit condition which requires further tree replacements.
Yes, thank you for that. Because obviously that I think has to be welcomed, and I wonder if that is something that South Kesteven can look at also adopting, i.e., beefing up our tree retention policy and replacement, and particularly hedgerows as well, which are really important, particularly if we are committed to reducing our carbon footprint, which I believe is one of our stated aims. So I think it would be a good thing to have come out of this particular application if we were to take that forward. So I'm making that point now, if anyone's listening. And yes, I think it's, I agree with Councillor Selby that it's obviously a well thought through application and an asset to Stamford. I do regret that hedgerow and the trees, albeit they may not be the best specimens, but they obviously do create habitat, and also they do they are difficult to replace, because as I think I've said before, it's easy to take a tree down, but you can't just put one up. They do have to grow and and be cultivated. So it's a shame, but I'm pleased with that policy, and I hope that we can emulate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stevens. Any other questions? questions, debate. I think it was councillor Baxter next, then you.
Yeah, yes, Chair, it was a debate rather than a question. Echo my colleagues' comments. It's very welcome, especially when we've lost hockey pitches in the district. It's great that there's a community use available. Is the Kettering Road Sports Centre community use statement on the website? Yes, I couldn't get to it because I haven't got access here. I think also you can stop sharing your screen now if you like. I was going to say in response to Harish's point, it does have solar panels and they are not solar PV, solar electric, that you can theoretically put on to any building, because this kind of building shouldn't be using that much electricity. People are jumping about, and the lights are on at night time, which is not the time for the solar electricity to work. But what it has got, which is a very welcome technology, are the hybrid hot water heater. It says hybrid natural gas and solar. So there should be a lot of washing taking place in the site, and so solar heated hot water it's a really good use of technology, and we definitely should be adapting it on other buildings. Perhaps if we build our own leisure centres, we could put that technology into them. So yeah, I'd welcome the recommendation.
Thank you, councillor Baxter. Councillor Bisnassing, did you?
Yes, Madam Chairman, I fully support this application. It's to be a very prime investment in Stamford in terms of sports for our children, and I fully welcome the community agreements that's going with this, so that the community also can participate, can have a facility that they can have additional sport facility or training in there. I fully support it, and I would really vote for it. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, it looks like we possibly have finished with debate with what's gone on. So shall we go to the vote? We've had a proposer by councillor Selby, and we've had a seconder, councillor Judy Stevens, and I take it is with the approval subjected to the updated conditions stated by the officer. Yes, we are happy with that. So all those in favour, please raise your hands. That looks like it's unanimous. Thank you very much. Right, we go to agenda item 6, S200908. Erection of 3 detached houses. Officer Phil Jordan will be presenting the report.
Can we just have 2 minutes while we just put the presentation?
Of course you can. Thank you.
Could you just give the details of the one we're just going to look at, because I missed it.
Sorry, it's item 6, S200908, erection of 3 detached houses, land off Kettering Road in Stamford. And we have no public speakers on this. It will just be the officers presenting the report. Could I make people aware that when you are speaking, you do need to speak directly into the mic so we can all hear you nice and clearly and loudly, because some of us are slightly hard of hearing. I know I am. Councillor Baxter, is it very necessary? Otherwise we can't continue with the meeting and you won't be able to vote on this item. Or you're just taking a photo? Fantastic. Thank you, Phil. Would you like to start?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yep. Next application is S200908. It's the erection of 3 houses and it's land off Kettering Road in Stamford. So members who were on the site visit or who know the site will know it's almost adjacent to the site of the last proposal. So the key issues for this application are the principle of development, the impact of the development on the character of the area, the setting of heritage assets, impact on residential amenity, highways issues, ecology and drainage. So again, you can see on the screen, it's a slightly outdated aerial image. You can see the site of the existing sports pitch that we spoke about on the last application. The land in between this site and where the red circle is, that's where the 5 houses are currently under construction. So this is the site zoomed in a bit more. Again, members who are on the site visit will recall we entered the site at this point. So there's a public footway that runs through the site and then it splits into 2. One of the public rights of way runs then across the site where the 5 houses are under construction. And then the second public right of way runs south towards Wothorpe. There is quite a sort of dense existing belt of trees and scrub to the front of the site. And there's been a move to preserve some of these trees by preservation order. The location plan here, which shows the site itself. So you can see the blue land is owned by the same developer. The red land is the land which is subject of this application. It's worth sort of noting, some members will be quite familiar with this site. It's in various guises, it's been in front of committee. originally the two sites combined were an allocation in the old 2014 site allocations policy, which was then sort of superseded by the local plan, which was adopted earlier last year. Within that policy, the site was originally allocated for 50 houses. And again, members may recall that there was various applications that came backwards and forwards to committee, and ultimately a scheme for 39 houses was refused by planning committee on the two sites. That refusal was upheld by the planning inspectorate, and subsequently a further application for a reduced scheme of 29 houses was again refused. And that time the appeal was allowed, but the developer at that time didn't take up that option of the 29 houses. And then the current developer came along and split the site into two parts. That then resulted in these 5 houses being granted permission, which was then followed up by a further application for 8 houses within the red line, where the current site is. And again, the scheme for 8 houses was refused by planning committee last year, and that decision was again appealed, and the appeal was allowed. So it's quite an important point to note that there is an extant permission within this red line for 8 houses for the same developer as the current application. At the same time that appeal was going on, this application for 3 dwellings was submitted and ran alongside the appeal. And this application was held in abeyance while the outcome of the appeal was waited for. And the reason for that were there were several sort of principal issues that we wanted to have that planning inspectorate decision on. One was the additional access off Kettering Road, and there were new policies within the local plan around the principle of developing on the edge of settlement. So this is looking towards the front of the site. You can see that sort of fairly dense hedgerow and some existing trees there. And then this is looking east along Kettering Road back towards the main part of Stamford. And then looking in the opposite direction, you can see on the right of the screen, this is the Cecil Square development, which is fairly recently constructed within the last 5 years. And then you can just see sort of to the back of the screen there, you can see the 5 houses which are under construction. Again, you can see a bit more of those current houses which have again come on since these photos were taken. So the scheme itself, it's a proposal for 3 dwellings utilising the same access that's approved under that extant permission for 8 dwellings. The scheme does show those trees largely to be retained to the front of the site. However, there currently isn't any control over that section of trees, and that's why there's been a move to protect those trees by preservation order. Again, this sort of wedge which runs diagonally across the site, was always noted within the various appeal decisions as being one of the important views. And again, members that were on the site visit will recall you've got a view towards the Bottle Lodges, which are the gates towards Burley House along that line. So it was always felt that that view should be preserved, and that's why the development's located towards the front part of the site. That this land would effectively be sterilised by this proposal. It doesn't allow for any further accesses through that this could be built on at a later date. And so the applicant's just shown this to be retained as paddock land, which is the same use as it is currently. So this just shows that scheme which was allowed under appeal. This is the 8 dwelling scheme. You can see the front part of the site was a short row of terrace properties, but these largely mirrored the houses on the other side of Cecil Square. They're not quite as high as those properties, but they are still sort of effectively 3-storey townhouses. And those properties effectively back onto Kettering Road. So these would be rear gardens. Another sort of fairly significant difference is this extant scheme consolidates that right of way into one public right of way that adjoins to the other site. So you can see just faintly that line of the existing footpath would require a separate process to extinguish that. So we'll just go back. There is a benefit in this scheme in that both of those footpaths are currently retained. Just going on to the house types, these been designed by the same architect, and it's the same developer on that adjacent site for 5 dwellings. So they largely mirror the style of those properties, but very much large, detached, traditional sort of properties using that Stamford stone and dark slate roofing. That they've been designed to try and pick up on some of the Georgian architecture in that part of Stamford. But again, it's very much a scheme that mirrors those 5 dwellings on the adjacent site. So just one condition update on this application, condition 9, which in the additional items paper, it references details under another condition, and the numbers don't tally up to the right condition. So this condition is just proposed to be updated to reference condition 8. And then just a summary of the issues that are outlined in the main report. The principle of development's now been established on the site through that appeal decision. The current proposal is now for a reduced number of dwellings, so that extant permissions for 8 dwellings, current proposals for 3. The development, the design of the properties are considered to be appropriate for the surrounding context. There is some minor harm to the setting of various heritage assets, which are outlined in the main report. That particular point's always been one of the key issues for this site, and it's been a consistent point through the various appeal decisions. But through the last appeal decision and through this current proposal, that harm is now considered to be very minor. So in the heritage assessment, that falls into less than substantial. But the planning inspector were very clear that it's considered to be very much at the lower end of less than substantial. And that's been agreed by our conservation officer on the heritage impact assessment that's been submitted with the application. There's not considered to be any adverse impacts on residential amenity of either of the adjoining residential sites. The public rights of way remain, both of those through the site. When we do identify harm to heritage assets, what the policy requires is that that harm's weighed against the public benefits of the scheme. Public benefits in this case are largely that improved retention of the public rights of way, and there is an agreed contribution towards affordable housing off-site. So that figure does reduce from the 8 dwelling scheme. So for the 8 dwellings, the affordable housing contribution equates to 3, or it's based on 3 properties off-site, and the agreed figure was £595,000. With this reduced scheme for 3 dwellings, it's based on a single dwelling, and the commuted sum is therefore calculated at £258,000. But those public benefits are still considered to outweigh any of that very minor harm that's been identified to the setting of the heritage assets. And, you know, a very significant material consideration is that there is now that extant permission for 8 dwellings on the site. So the officer recommendation is the application should be approved, subject to the conditions set out in the main report with that minor update as outlined. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Phil. As we don't have any public speakers on this, we'll go straight into debate. And do we have any comments? Councillor Stevens?
Sorry. Yeah, there was one thing, and that was noticed at the site visits yesterday. There is some ironwork on the current footpath, an old kissing gate that's still there, not in great condition, but it is old and it is still there. It would be, I think, advantageous to keep some of the ironwork if possible, to retain some of that, if not in situ, as part of the new footpath. Sorry, where is it?
On page 55, at the bottom, subparagraph 4 of 6.31.
Yeah, that's yes, but I would suggest that we try and keep the one that's already there rather than a new one, if possible. So adapt the existing one. Can that be conditioned in some way?
Thank you. Yeah, I did consider that point. Condition 8 requires details of a soft and hard landscaping scheme, which is effectively where we would pick up on the details of the public right-of-way surfacing and any details around that. I don't think it's possible to explicitly protect those styles by condition, given that the public right-of-way is in it's effectively the responsibility of Lincolnshire County Council, their countryside team. That said, you know, we would consult with them on a discharge of conditions, and I think it would be sort of appropriate to perhaps put a note in if it was felt, you know, important that those styles were seen to be retained. I think to explicitly require their retention is probably outside the control of what we can do. That, you know, like I say, the condition does require us to pick up those details, and it will require subsequent approval. And we would do that in conjunction with Lincolnshire County Council and the countryside team. But if there was a feeling around those being important features, I think it would be appropriate to put it as a note to applicant.
Sorry, can you just wait, please, Judy, because we can't hear you, so you need to wait for your mic before you speak.
Yeah, I do think it's important because I think we are losing quite a lot here. I know we have got the extent approval for 8 houses here, so the 3 is preferable to the 8, but we still are encroaching on that countryside. And looking through the papers here, there's obviously strong objections from local councils as to this application anyway. So I think the least that we can do is to try and retain some of what was there. And so if that could go on as an advisory note, if that's all that can happen, then I would appreciate that did. That's okay, thank you.
Thank you, and you will do that for us, won't you, Phil?
It can be done, yeah.
Lovely, thank you very much. Councillor Selby and then Councillor Jackie Smith. Oh, sorry.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. Although we have the elevation plans on the agenda, we don't have the floor plans. My question is, how many bedrooms is it envisaged that these 3 properties will have each? My reason for asking is, am I correct in thinking that there's likely to be less traffic movement onto Kettering Road with having the three properties instead of the 8. That's basically what we're getting to.
Yeah, so all 3 are 5-bedroom properties, and yeah, you would assume that 3 properties would generate less traffic than 8 properties. The 8 properties that have got permission are all 4 or 5-bedroom dwellings as well.
Thank you. Then Councillor Harish Basnell Singh and then Jackie Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you, Phil, for the presentations. Phil, will it be possible to clarify something for me? You've got in your presentation there's 258,572 is set for off-site contribution to extra care affordable housing. Could you clarify the extra care affordable housing? What does that actually mean? Is it like a care homes or?
Yep. So when we have a negotiation over affordable housing, we do it in conjunction with what we refer to as the council's affordable housing officer, who actually works in partnership with various registered providers. This largely mirrors the requirement on the 8 dwelling scheme, which was also for extra care housing in Stamford. Extra care housing is housing which is designed to provide a level of care. That can be elderly people or people with certain care requirements, and the extra care requirement is it's a specific terminology which relates to the internal adaptations within the property to enable that care to take place.
Is that instead of affordable housing, or is that in addition to affordable housing contribution somewhere else?
It's a type of affordable housing. So typically they're schemes which are built in small complexes where you get a certain level of care provision comes in and out of the properties. The residents still live independently, but they have that sort of care facility offered to them. But it falls within that broad kind of category of affordable housing, which now can include all sorts of different types of tenure of properties. So it's not instead of or additional to, it's a type of affordable housing.
So this is not administered by the actual developers, by under the authority as KDC will administer that?
Yeah, the money would come to us as the district council, and then that money could either be 258,000 isn't likely to fund the whole development in its own right, so it would go towards development, and it can be pooled with development contributions from other developments, or it can be used to subsidise a scheme that's already sort of had committed funding against it. But effectively that money comes to us as the council, and then it's administered by us in terms of the delivery of that housing.
Thank you, Phil. Councillor Jackie Smith.
Yes, thank you. I believe that there are other items of interest, as well as the gate. Is it a gate or a skitting gate? As well as that, there are, it seemed yesterday, looking very carefully through the trees and the shrubs, that at some stage there were footpaths or paths from previous housing, perhaps that was there, that goes through actually onto the footpath. Now those looked to be quite interesting possible gates. Now, they don't have to go on the front. They could go somewhere else on the site, but I think it would be very nice. And there were one or two other wrought iron items within that area that if they could be brought into use with the housing, I think it would be nice to add that and perhaps tone in to an extent with the new houses that are being built at the moment. So is that possible to look carefully at just what is hidden by trees and shrubs at the moment to see how they could be incorporated? Because it's old craftsmanship apart from anything else. So I think we ought to try to keep as much as we can of that sort of thing in Stamford or anywhere else where we happen to find it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's effectively the same answer. We can encourage it through the advisory note. The detail of the landscaping, boundary treatments is all required by condition. So we'll have the ability to, consider those details at a later date. But we can't specifically, I think, protect those gates and other items by condition, but we can just encourage their attention through that note.
Thank you. Does that answer your question?
I should keep my eye open.
Do I have anybody else who wishes to make a comment in the debate? Harish? Question, debate, do at the same time.
Well, Madam Chairman, if we're going into the debate, I would say that this site is sensitive in terms of the view of from the first strip of Stamford and Walthall. It forms parts of the setting of Stamford, but putting these sites is going to totally upset the balance a bit. I know it's been said in here, the limited degree of harm it's going to do to the conservation area, but it's still harm. We can't quantify this limited degree of harm, how much harm it's going to be. You're saying that we got a conservation area, like the pedigree horse, and here we are on the side of it, we're putting a donkey, So I think that the comparison is not quite the same. But I think also it's mentioned here somewhere that it outweighs the public benefits that's going to gain for Stamford. I can't see any public gain ever benefits going to outweigh for Stamford if we are not going to have with that proportion of land, no affordable homes, which actually Stamford needs. So affordable, truly affordable homes in that area in Stamford. And also these three buildings, I don't think anybody from Stamford will be able to afford to buy any of those. So it'll be people from outside, and those people that come from outside stay there. They contribute very little to the town itself. They will be getting up in the morning, going out to work wherever they are in London or commuting somewhere else, and coming back in the evening. And that's about as far as a contribution. We already got examples of that around in Stamford. So, Madam Chairman, I feel very, very hard pushed for me to support this application. I'll further probably go for the 9 houses that is there, but these 3 is total waste of time. It's only, Richmond's play area.
Thank you. And that is to bear in mind that this area has already got planning permission for 8. So is it better to have 8 or is it better to have 3? And with everywhere, people commute, but hopefully people will spend money at the weekend. Anybody else? Councillor Back.
It's disappointing. If I've read it right, we turned down the S19 1519 application, but it was one on appeal. Is that correct? Yeah, so I mean, we've made our views clear as a council. We don't want housing on the site, but the planning inspector has made his or her view clear that we've got to have it. I think that the comments you made about preserving the 2 footpaths are pretty much what swing it for me. I don't know how many people will live in a 5-bedroom house. I suspect it won't be a family of 7, and you never know anyway, do you? It could be a pension by themselves, or it could be 3 families sharing the house together. We've no idea how many people or cars or anything else are going to be on this. I think this scheme is marginally better than the 8 or 9 houses scheme, and given that we've been beaten into it by the planning inspector, I don't see we can really give grounds for refusal, can we?
We are in between a rock and a hard place, I think, with this one, as it would be said. But any other views, comments? Councillor Selby?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chairman. I'll comment on this. Yeah, Ash is hitting the nail on the head there. I mean, if this goes to appeal, it's going to go through. I would suggest. I don't like the idea of them building on this land. It's a lovely setting there. It really is. But I made the point with the question that I made earlier with regarding less traffic movements onto Kettering Road. That's got to be a plus. I do think though there's people in Stamford that got a lot of money could afford this. I'm sure. But Madam Chairman, I think we've no alternative but to support this, Madam Chairman. I think.
Thank you, and I would second that proposal. I won't. Well, in that case, I will propose it if we've finished with debate. Sorry, Councillor Jackie Smith.
I was just going to propose it.
Well, then I'll second your proposal. Yeah, it's like I said, we're in a rock and a hard place with this one. Are you proposing with the additional condition given by the officer earlier on? Yes, so I will second that. And can we go for a vote if everybody is happy? So those for approval? Yeah. Those against? 1. Thank you. And those abstaining? Thank you. So the motion has been carried. Thank you. Right, we will go to our next item on the agenda, which is item 7, which is S210443. I think Officer Chris Brown will be presenting this one, so we'll wait for him to get his screens up. And we do have a member of the public speaking, and that is Mr. David Turnock. Have I pronounced it correctly? Turnock, thank you. So there we go. We'll just wait for the officer, and thank you, Phil, for your presentation so far. Thank you, Chris, and you're going to present this report for us.
Thank you, Chairman. This application is for the proposed erection of a warehouse with ancillary showroom space for Kyoto Futons, 13 small employment units for a mix of B2 and B8 use, together with car parking and vehicle servicing areas. Can everybody hear me okay? Yeah. Okay. The key issues raised as part of this application are the principle of development, the impact on the character and appearance of the area, and highway impact. Moving on to the site location, the application site is located to the east of Frognall and east of Market Deeping and Deeping St James, and that as shown on your screens there. Moving into a more zoomed in aerial view of the site, this shows the existing employment site, which is known as Squirrels Lodge, with a proposal on vacant land within the wider employment site boundary. The site is currently turfed with storage containers on site proposed to be replaced by the proposed warehouse. I'll just move the mouse, if you can see where the mouse is located there in the centre. That's the centre of the site proposed. That's the red line application site. This is now the site entrance from Hards Lane to the north of the site. The proposal will utilise the same access as the existing access. That's the frontage of the site from Hards Lane, now looking into the site. Again, this is the view taken from the north, looking south. From the same spot, now closer in, so again, now this is the view into the site through the fencing. Note the existing storage containers on the site proposed to be replaced by the proposed warehouse. This is now the view from slightly further along. This is the view down Custom Road. Please note the trees down this view are proposed to be retained, and I'll come on to a planting plan later. This is now from the view sort of now slightly west towards the existing buildings. You can see through the fence there. Now this is into the existing Kyoto site, again with the storage containers on the left and the existing buildings on the right of your picture there. And a slightly overexposed picture there, but that's a view back to the rest of the Squirrels Lodge industrial estate. This map is taken from policy DNP4 of the Deepings Neighbourhood Plan, which, and shows the site included within the red outline of the Neighbourhood Plan policy, with the site safeguarded for employment use. So again, if you can see the mouse there, the site is proposed here within this wider red line boundary of the Neighbourhood Plan policy, allocating the site for employment use. This is the proposed block plan. So this shows the existing Kyoto site is shown in the light blue colour. The proposed warehouse for Kyoto Futons is shown in purple. And then the 13 small employment units are shown in orange at the north of the site. And again, the site plan shows an overview of the proposal, now with the warehouse central in the screen. The small employment units are located to the north of the warehouse. Sufficient car parking spacing is proposed mixed amongst the units, together with further car parking to the north of the existing Kyoto Futon site as well. These are the proposed elevations of units 1 to 4, which form one whole building across the north boundary of the site. And the floor plans of units 1 to 4. I'll continue flicking on the floor plans, but effectively for the small employment units, they're all an open plan layout with small ancillary office space and amenities. So that's the elevations for the units 5 and 6 and 7 and 8, which mirror each other across the site. Their floor plans. The elevation for units 9 to 13 and their floor plan. And now moving on to the warehouse. That's the front elevation there at the top and the side elevation at the bottom. And the same again now to the rear for the warehouse elevations. Now moving on to the warehouse floor plans. So this is for storage purposes. So that's the ground floor storage there in open plan. And then if I move on to the first floor plan, that shows the ancillary showroom and ancillary office space to be provided. Site section, so if you look across the bottom of your screen there, that shows the site section. So it shows the proposed warehouse and the height of that compared to the existing buildings on site, and also shows the proposed landscaping immediately next to the warehouse as well. The planting plan I said I'd come back to. This shows the retention of the existing trees, which are mainly to the eastern boundary of the site along Custom Road, and also has further planting of 54 trees of a mix of 5 species, together with further shrub planting around the site and around the proposed units. And the applicant has provided a indicative perspective view of the site. So this shows the relationship with the existing buildings, which are shown in white in the background there, together then with the materials and the scale and appearance of the proposed buildings, then around the corner of the view between Custom Road and Hards Lane. Moving on to evaluation of the scheme, the application is considered to be acceptable in principle, with a proposal supported by local plan policy E5 for the expansion of an existing business, together with the site being safeguarded for employment use in the Deepings neighbourhood plan. There are no objections from any consultees. There's no highway impact anticipated, with the proposed warehouse not considered to increase vehicle movements over and above the existing Kyoto futons, as this replaces and expands storage only, and with the 13 small employment units considered to result in low peak time traffic movements. Landscape impact has been considered with the proposal, however, is not considered to result in any landscape harm when taken with the existing employment use of the site, the existing backdrop of employment buildings, together with the scale and materials of the proposed buildings and the proposed planting plan. Construction management plan and archaeology works are the only pre-commencement conditions, with further conditions securing drainage compliance, landscape implementation, provision of electric car charging points, and hours of operation of the site. The application is therefore recommended for approval subject to conditions. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Now we have Speaker Mr. David Tunnock. If you'd like to come, you have 3 minutes, and Shelley will let you know when you have 30 seconds left.
Good morning, Chair, Councillors. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you this morning. I'll start by reading something from Mr. Kansia, who is one of the directors of Kyoto Futons, tell you a little bit about the business. We're looking to increase our business by 20% this year, which will lead to additional staff. We have just employed additional members in the office and are currently interviewing for additional factory staff. We would hope to see this number rise again over the next 12 months by an additional 3 or 4 staff members for Kyoto. Due to the pandemic, we've seen a major increase in freight and material costs as a business. And when we're developing more products, which will come in kit form to be finished in the UK, which will ultimately increase our requirement for labour on our site here. We're seeing major shortages of capacity within the UK furniture industry, particularly upholstery, which is one of the mainstays of our business. We're also looking to link up more with local schools and colleges to help bring on more staff from the local area, with the intention of introducing more apprenticeship opportunities. The new development will also provide a better working environment for existing staff. So if I now go on and talk a little bit about the design, I'd have to say, for starters, this has been a very good example of a pre-application process, and your planning officer was very helpful in actually organising consultations with the major consultee. So hopefully the application that has come to you today has resolved all the major issues, and obviously it is recommended for approval. So in terms of design and layout, this site is at the edge of an existing business park. This is a good opportunity to nicely finish off a rather raw edge to the development at the moment, and you'll have seen the photos. One particular thing we want to do is enhance the landscaping along the east and southern boundaries, which will actually well screen the existing activities plus these new proposed activities. And as well as enhancing the landscaping, there is a comment in your report that will improve the biodiversity on the site as well, which is a good thing. So the conditions that are being suggested, one was for archaeology. We've already been in touch with Heritage Lincolnshire. They've given us a brief for the archaeological work they would like to see take place on the site. We're getting quotes for that at the moment. So should you be minded to grant consent to this today, we can do those pre-commencement issues before work can commence. And similarly on the drainage as well. We know the restrictions on that, and our drainage engineers are already working on detailed designs which we can roll out. So I think that's a good summary. I commend this application to you today, and thank you for your time. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. And do I have any questions, Councillor Judy Stevens?
Yeah, good morning. I just wondered if you could be a little bit more specific about the construction materials and the materials that you're going to be using, because obviously this, you're quite right, it does round off the development, but it is sort of out in the countryside as well, isn't it? There's nothing else beyond that. So if you could be more specific, that would be really useful.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, I should have mentioned that with regards to the warehouse itself, we're proposing to clad that in a dark green cladding, so it will have a very recessive effect. A lot of modern industrial buildings are done in very shiny materials. The large warehouse that Kyoto need to store their produce, their product, will actually be in a cladding which will sit behind the thick landscape screen. So I'm not saying it's going to be invisible, but it'll be as well screened and will fit in as well with the landscape as it possibly can.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Selby?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'd just like to go back to ask you to clarify the number of jobs that this will create. I mean, will there be a night shift with the beds? So I'm tongue in cheek with the last comment.
Thank you, Councillor. No, it's not a plan to work a night shift. It'll be normal daytime hours, but in your report, I think it calculates a number of 63 additional jobs on the whole site. Some of those will be for Kyoto, some for the smaller units. And it's interesting to note that when this application has gone in, there's always been some interest from small local businesses wanting to buy or rent those units. So we think that's a good thing. It will service local demand and cut down travel time, and hopefully in our post-COVID times allow people to work closer to home.
Thank you. Any other questions? No. Thank you very much then. Right, we will go into debate now. Do I have anybody wishing to make any comment or question the officer? Councillor Baxter, thank you.
Thank you. I can't see massive opposition to this development, but I would like to pick up on the paragraph on highways issues. Again, for avoidance of doubt, my daughter is currently an apprentice on the site, not at this business, but the next door business. And I've got no pecuniary or personal interest other than that. And no, sorry, I've got no pecuniary interest in this application. It says, it is noted that within a representation that the site is not accessible through walking. This is not disputed. Well, yes, it is. My daughter and everyone else on the site, if they don't have a driving license, have no choice but to walk to the site. The fact that it's not suited for walking or cycling for that matter is regrettable, and it's a shame. Unless I've missed it, there doesn't seem to be any improvement to the highway infrastructure within this plan. If we're having 13 new, what do we call them, small business units, that is going to generate an increase in traffic, which is going to generate an increase both in cycles and pedestrians, but also in danger to cycles and pedestrians and other road users. With two almost blind bends at either end of the site, the highways is a real concern. But what really annoyed me about this report is that a traffic survey undertaken in June 2020 said blah, 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 blah. What is the point of a traffic survey in June 2020 when everybody's furloughed in the middle of a global pandemic? It's worse than useless. I don't know when the application went in, and so it's difficult to measure, but I wonder whether highways did any other research in terms of asking the sites who are using that site how many vehicular movements they usually have. So anyway, I've got concerns about the highways issues, but I don't have any concerns about other than what the parish council have picked up on the actual application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Councillor Baxter. With regards to the provision of walking infrastructure, the site is located over 800 metres away from the nearest population settlement, i.e. Market Deeping, St James.
I forgot to mention that 800 metres. Are we really saying that in 2020 people cannot walk 800 metres? That's not a very long way. That's not barely half a mile.
We're not suggesting that people can't walk up to 800 metres, but 800 metres is sort of a rough standardised measure of the distance people would be willing to walk. So it is over 800 metres away from the nearest population settlement, but it's well within a cycling distance from those population centres of Market Deeping, St James. I think everything's within 5 kilometres, which is taken as sort of a rough cycling sort of circumference, if you like, sort of distance to the site. And I think during the traffic survey, one person was noted cycling to the site as well. So it is considered to be accessible by cycling, although not necessarily by walking. But that's more to the distance from the nearest population rather than the lack of any footways. With regards to the traffic survey undertaken, that was obviously undertaken by the applicant during June 2020. I appreciate what your comments with regards to potentially sort of lower highway movements than there would be normally. However, that was undertaken as a baseline to then assess the impact of the proposed vehicle movements from the site on top of the baseline. The County Council have looked at that and considered that any impact isn't severe. The impact would be very low from new highway movements on top of the existing baseline highway movements.
Thank you. But as we all know on planning, when it comes to Lincolnshire County Council, I'm to say no more. Councillor Bisnessing.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you very much, Chris, for the presentations. Very clear. Chris, I'm very, very interested in knowing about our culture and our heritage. Paragraph 5.6.1, where it says, for the archaeological remains, for excavations, as very little insufficient information is available at present, but they would like to have a further investigations on that. I wonder if just having a trench, which really offers very minimal excavations, if that can be amended to, we can have a slightly fuller investigation, not as a full investigation, but a more deeper investigations on that to give us a bit more of our past history.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Councillor. The proposal there is standard wording effectively from Heritage Lincolnshire. So they have asked for a written scheme of investigation in the first instance from the applicant, and that's all we've secured through the planning condition. The speaker mentioned that they have engaged with Heritage Lincolnshire already to start that conversation off, and they are willing to undertake the archaeology investigations on site. The method of trial trenching has been proposed by Heritage Lincolnshire, not by us, and that's considered to be a suitable method by them for the extent of the archaeology works proposed. That is a normal practice, whether this is a small housing site, a very, very large housing site, or in this case, an employment site. It'd be the same for any of them.
Thank you. If there's something substantial or more or less substantial found there, can the time be extended?
Well, if something substantial is found as part of the works undertaken, then that would likely prompt Heritage Lincolnshire to ask for further trial trenching to be undertaken across the site. So yes, that will vary depending what's found.
Anybody else? Any questions? Considerations? Councillor Selby?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Kyoto Futon, I'm assuming it's a Japanese company. Well, I just find it odd how Japanese companies making mattresses and beds when they sleep on the floor in Japan. However, I'm delighted to hear about the jobs it's going to create. I'm happy to propose the recommendation, Madam Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Harris-Bisnessing?
I will second that, Madam Chairman.
Lovely. Thank you very much. So, Councillor Jackie Smith?
Thank you. I was just going to follow up on the archaeological and historic side. We do, I think, lose a lot of our knowledge of just what we have got around by not perhaps being specific enough about what we would like to know, or what they would perhaps advise us through the Heritage Lincolnshire, the possibilities, because there are an awful lot of sites in Lincolnshire that we never find out anything about them until somebody's dug them up and disposed of them. So can we be a little bit more specific, please, on Heritage Lincolnshire?
Well, I think Heritage Lincolnshire are the experts. And I think Chris did state what would happen, that it is standard, they dig the trench, if they find anything, other trenches will be dug. So, you know, they are the experts. We will follow their recommendations. Thank you. Thank you. So we have a proposer, we have a seconder. Do we have any other speakers in the debate? No. So can we go for a vote then, please? Those in favour of the proposal? That is unanimous. Thank you very much. Thank you. Right, we will go to the next item on the agenda, item 8, S210309. Yeah, quick 5 minutes. If anybody else wishes, quick 5 minutes, be back at 10 to 12. Thank you. Right, lovely. Everybody's back in the chamber. We will carry on with agenda item 8, S210309. And we have Phil presenting the report on this one, please. Thank you.
Just to remind members that we are still live recording, so just bear that in mind when you're having your conversations. Thank you.
Thank you. This next application is reference S210309. It's for the erection of 14 small industrial units on land at Spitfire Park in Market Deeping. There's quite a complex site history to this particular site. The most recent approval was for a very similar application for 14 small industrial units, and that was approved under S201192, so late last year that was. Key issues for the development proposal are the principle of development, the impact of the use on the character of the area, impact on neighbouring properties and highways impacts. So, as I said, the site history is quite complicated on this one, and does certainly go back as far as 2007 when there were industrial units approved on the site. More recently, there was a scheme for 7 larger industrial units approved in 2019, And then the most recent planning permission that I've spoke about for 14 industrial units was approved under that S20 reference. I've got some slides which show those previous approvals in a bit more detail. The land to the east of the site is a residential development of up to 240 dwellings. That was approved in 2016. The eastern side of that site, or the eastern side of this site, forms the boundary of the rear gardens of those approved dwellings. The land to the west is undeveloped land, but that has outline consent for an employment development, and that again is an allocated employment site. So Google image of the site, again it's slightly dated, this photo, in that you can see the sites to the north of Market Deeping. This is that main roundabout as you enter Market Deeping off the A15. This land here to the east, this is the residential development, which is well underway. Some of those properties either nearing completion or completed. And then it's this land to the west, which is the allocated employment site. So it's very much this existing employment land is very much a transition between that residential site and proposed further employment uses to the west. So again, this just shows the site in a bit more detail. You can see there is already some commercial buildings within the site and some further commercial uses to the northern part of the site. What that doesn't show is this residential development which is under construction. So this is looking into the site from Northfield Road, and you can see those dwellings which have been constructed, which, as I say, they're rear gardens back onto the edge of this site. Again, you can see that a bit closer there, and you can see they are in quite close proximity to the site boundary. So the location plan just defines the extent of the site. It's the northern part of this existing employment site. This was the development approved in 2019. So preceding this, there were earlier, more extensive commercial developments approved on the site, and at the time this was seen as reducing the impact on those approved dwellings to the east. And you can see what you can see is though that this southern building still was placed in quite close proximity to the rear of those properties, whilst there was some relief along that eastern boundary of the site. Again, you had quite a significant gable end of that section of buildings to the north. So this was the scheme that followed and was approved and was seen as an improvement in terms of the impact on those residential properties to the east. It put all the development into one building, but pulled the development further away from that eastern boundary. And as well as that increased separation distance, there was a fairly significant reduction in terms of the overall height of the building. So this scheme that follows is really an amendment of that existing permission. A lot of the changes are internal to the building, and there's now a different type of unit size which is proposed. So it now splits them into 3 different unit sizes: 42 square meters, 57 square meters, and 70 square meters. There's still an overall number of 14 units, and the overall footprint of the building is largely similar to that approved before, albeit there is a small increase in the overall footprint of the building. The overall height and separation distance is the same as that extant permission granted in S20. The development also moves the access slightly further over to the east, away from the pumping station, and that reduces 2 of the car parking spaces on site. There's also a slight amendment to the footpath link from that adjacent residential development. So previously that was to the frontage of the highway verge, but now that's pulled back towards the edge of the site. So the exterior of the building is sort of identical really to that approved previously in last year. You can see the rear part of the elevation, which is closest to the residential properties, goes to a lower eaves height, and that was done at the time to reduce the impact on those properties. So evaluation really just summarises what's in the main report. The principle of development has been established through various permissions on the site, most recently through that extant permission for 14 units. The current proposal does result in a minor increase in floor space, just slightly covered there by the, it's in the main report. I'm say 806 metres from 784. Happy to be corrected on that figure, but it is detailed in the main report. The building's the same height as previously approved. The footpath realignment from the previous permission I've highlighted, and then again those consequential minor alterations to the layout and the access. There's not considered to be any residential amenity impacts beyond those already assessed and approved under the S20 application, and likewise for flood risk. No further highway safety impacts that haven't been previously considered. So the application is recommended for approval subject to the conditions in the main report. There is one minor amendment, condition 14, which includes the specified use as B1. In the updated use classes order, there's now there's a sort of a consolidated use class, which is use class E, which includes various different uses, including some retail uses. And just to ensure that the planning authority had control over any changes of use within that E use class, it's recommended to specify that alongside use class B1, we should specify that it's use class E subset G, which specifically refers to this light industrial use, which is appropriate for residential areas. And that then means that if there were any other changes of uses within the E class, they would have to come to the local planning authority for planning permission. Thank you, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Phil. Can you turn your mic on? Thank you very much for that report. And we have no public speakers on this, so we'll go straight into debate questions. And Councillor Ashley Baxter was first up. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I might wish to contribute to the debate later on, but my question would be, have you had any conversation with the developer about solar PV, as mentioned by my colleague Harish earlier on? I mean, this does look like a site where solar PV might be an appropriate, a more appropriate technology. I know we can't force people to do them, but did they mention whether or not they had given it any thought? Thanks.
Sorry, can I just try and sort the screen? I'll come back to the question, just try and sort the screen sharing back to the. I think that's done it. Thank you. I wasn't the case officer for this, so I don't know if those specific conversations have taken place. But our approach to this type of ensuring sustainable building methods and sustainable credentials has been to do it by condition. So that there is a condition which requires the applicant to submit details of what those sustainability measures are going to be to us, which we would then consider against that condition. That's been considered to be an appropriate approach. We've done it on large-scale residential schemes, particularly because when the houses actually end up getting built versus when we grant planning permission, the technology kind of moved on, and so it's considered to be appropriate to consider the details by condition at the point they're going to construct the dwellings. And I think the same's reasonable in this case. My understanding is that this is effectively a speculative employment development. There aren't any stated end users at this point in time. So I guess now they have the planning permission and they've sought to sort of give themselves some variation on the unit sizes. They would go to market and seek to secure some end users, which would allow them to be able to finance and then construct the building. And it would be at that point that they would then discharge the conditions, one of which being that sustainable building measures condition. And they would have to effectively write to us and tell us what sustainability measures they're going to put in place with the building. And that's the point we would consider those details.
Thank you. Have you just said that there is a condition that says come back with your sustainable building proposals? That's something that the planning officers mop up after the planning permission has been granted. Is that what I've just heard you say?
Yeah, so it's condition 5. So that's no development shall take place until details demonstrating how the proposed units would comply with the requirements of local plan policy SB1. So SB1 is the policy in the local plan which requires development to be built in, or take consideration of sustainable building measures. So they would effectively have to come to us with a scheme to show compliance with that particular policy.
Okay, then. So a follow-up to that, the electricity bill is most likely to be met by the tenant. So the benefit of any on-site generation is likely to benefit the tenant. Therefore, the landlord and the developer doesn't have any financial incentive to put solar PV on there. It's just an extra cost for him, unless he thinks he can find a way to keep the income from the sale of the electricity. Do you understand what I'm getting at? Is there a way that we can heavily, I don't want to put him off, but is there a way that we can heavily encourage the developer to consider renewable technologies?
Yeah, I mean, I think it would have to be an advisory note again. If you look at the sustainable building policy, there are some specifics in there, and they're to do with electric car charging points and to do with water efficiency. There isn't anything specific about about solar panels, so it's difficult to be absolutely prescriptive about those because it isn't a policy requirement. But that said, we through a note to the applicant, we can advise them that we think it would be very much appropriate in this instance. But that's the strongest we can be, because we can only go by the policies in the plan, and if they meet the criteria of that policy, they've done what they need to do.
So yes, please add whichever advisory note says what you just did. In terms of the debate, I think it's welcome. I mean, the people who've just moved into I think they are council houses, the other side of the fence. They were on a lesser used part of an industrial site, and now they're on an industrial site. Is there any danger of noise at times when one might not expect noise You'd expect noise, I guess, from 9 till 5 on a working week. But the improvements to the pedestrian access are certainly welcome because it is a dangerous road, and so anything that enhances it would be great. It's a shame that there isn't an access to the rest of an access at the south of the site, but I think that horse is already bolted, or the train has gone, or whatever the metaphor is. It's too late to put an access into that town gate development at this stage. So generally, I welcome the development. I'd be happy to propose we accept, subject to whatever advisory note is being added.
Thank you. And regarding the opening times on page 103, 7.3.7, it does state that it would be from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Monday to Friday, 7 a.m. till 12 noon on a Saturday, and closed Sundays and bank holidays. So that answers that one. Is noise at 7 a.m. on a Saturday morning appropriate? Well,
Sorry,
hopefully it's going to be like industry, isn't it?
Yeah, so I mean, if I just draw attention to a couple of other conditions. So we have sort of pulled conditions along from previous permissions on this site, and that there's always been quite a robust set of conditions in terms of noise impact. So condition 13 limits noise operations on the premises not to exceed 55 decibels as measured at the boundaries of the site between 7 in the morning and 7 in the evening. And then there's a lower threshold for Saturdays of 45 decibels. And they're the levels at which it's considered to be appropriate. As they're speculative units at the moment, and it does include a broad range of uses which go from B1, B2, which is light industrial, and B8, which is storage and distribution. There is again a condition 6, which requires that if a use comes in which is B2, so that's a light industrial use, then the applicant has to submit details, including a noise impact assessment, which demonstrates how the noise would, or why the noise would be appropriate within that residential environment. So it's certainly a consideration, and it's whenever you get this transition between employment, industrial uses and residential, there's clearly a conflict, and I think, you know, we accept there's previous permissions on the site, but the best we can do is try to mitigate it through those noise conditions.
Mike.
Thank you. I don't know the right way to request it, but I would certainly request that the 7 o'clock become an 8 o'clock, because any day of the week, I think that noise at 55 decibels at 7 o'clock in the morning is not going to be welcome.
Phil, can you answer that one for me?
Yeah, Helen, if I, sorry, is my mic, yeah, I'm on. Yeah, I think, yeah, I think the point is taken, but there is a fairly clear line. We've already got extant permission on this site for those hours, and I think Phil will correct me if I'm wrong, but that is a fairly consistent approach in terms of those hours. And then just offer that back through you, Chair, as the recommendation in front of you today with those conditions with those hours. And obviously that's fairly clear advice. Obviously I appreciate other thoughts on that, but that is where those hours have come from, with the input from technical consultees as well. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, just to add to that, I mean, as Mr. Upton said, the conditions are as per the previous extant permission on the site. It's been done in conjunction with Environmental Protection, who would be responsible for any statutory noise nuisance complaints, which again, that legislation sits over and above any planning permission that may be granted. But 55 decibels is seen as the level which is which is reasonable within that, within that residential environment. And that's the threshold they work to. So I think going anything beyond that and amending the condition could be seen as us being unreasonable, which is one of the the clear legal tests for a condition. It has to be reasonable, and if we go beyond that and it's unreasonable, we're subject to challenge and potentially subject to costs.
Sorry to bang on about it, but I think it is perfectly reasonable when we as a council are moving families the other side of the fence. I think it's perfectly reasonable not to have noise of 55 decibels at 7 o'clock in the morning. I think 8 o'clock is more than generous on our part as both a planning authority and as a responsible landlord. Have I interpreted Mr. Brown and Mr. Upton correctly? Are you saying that we shouldn't because previously we've allowed noise at 7 o'clock in the morning, or we can't because we've previously allowed it? Because as a suggestion from me, at least on behalf of councillors, if we're capable of putting that condition in, then I'd like to put that condition in.
Right, we'll go for advice with Martha on that one. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. It's a little bit of everything of what you've just said, Councillor Baxter, in that we have the council has recently in 2019 granted permission for the 2020 for the previous site, and those hours and those noise levels were deemed acceptable. So the council has obviously made the decision at that time, but also those levels and those times have been agreed along with your statutory consultees, so your environmental protection officers. They've got the evidence and they will have assessed it in the same way that we rely on LCC for their expert technicalities in terms of highways and flooding. So that's how the condition has been shaped and come about. So without the evidence to the contrary, against those officers' experts' opinions that noise level at that time isn't appropriate, it would be hard for us to substantiate even if we hadn't approved the 2020 permission with the conditions on. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you very much for that advice. I think that answers your question.
Correct, Chair. I don't think those houses were occupied in 2019, and I think even in 2019, anyone that was aware that there were occupied houses with families living on a Saturday morning at 8 o'clock, at 7 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday, to allow that noise from essentially a factory.
But don't forget, the noise will be facing away from them. The way the buildings are situated, it will be facing away from them. And 55 decibels isn't that much. I could go out and cut my grass at that time of the morning and it would probably be louder.
So are we allowed to revise that condition?
We can't revise it because we've already given planning permission previously.
Is that what the lady said?
You can amend the condition. However, I would strongly advise you to consider not amending the condition for the reasons set out by the planning officer, in the sense of the history of the previous permission, the comments of your experts, the environmental protection officers, leaves you very open to the council being seen to be unreasonable. You have that extant permission, and so even if you granted permission with the amended condition, they could appeal that condition, and there are strong grounds to say that the council have been unreasonable in amending that condition, and it opens you up for a challenge of costs. Thank you.
Councillor Selby, I believe, was next.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Well, my question actually was in relation to condition number 13 as well, in relation to noise, and it's been comprehensively answered, I have to say. So thank you very much indeed, Phil. But just on this particular point with regarding the 7 o'clock start, my question then is that the units at the other end of the site, I'm assuming that they're a 7 o'clock start on a Saturday, I'm assuming, are they? So we can't really have one rule for one part of the site and one rule for the other side, can we? The other side of it. So you could, but it doesn't seem right. But that's my question. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Selby. Do we know the answer to that one?
Yeah, my understanding is the conditions which sit to the southern part of the site have, been pulled forward to this current application. I think the key thing is the 55 decibels. That's that's the limit we've set or have been recommended to set, and that's the limit that's considered to be acceptable. It's not accepting a higher level of noise. It's saying that's the highest we're accepting you can go to in that residential environment. So it's accepting that noise level is acceptable through those daytime hours, and then it sets a lower threshold for weekends.
Thank you.
Please. So just to clarify, that the units at the other end of the site on a Saturday morning, are they 7 o'clock start? Could you just clarify that, please?
My understanding is it's the same conditions that apply to the southern part, yes.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Stevens, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I'm thinking about Tesco's in Godsey Lane. And when we gave permission for a new area there for turning for heavy goods vehicles deliveries. And I'm sure we put conditions on that because there are very similar houses in a very similar proximity to that. And I don't know if you could rustle that out of the blue, but I think we did. But also, just going back to what Mr. Upton said, I think I heard you say that it wasn't unreasonable to accept the noise to start at 8 o'clock, not at 7. Or did I mishear you? Sorry.
Sorry, through you, Chair. It was that the conditions proposed were reasonable. I didn't really make a comment about 8 o'clock. It was just you could be seen to be unreasonable, as elucidated further by Miss Rees in terms of amending the times that have been recommended. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Miss He, and I haven't finished. I have actually been to these houses very recently that are built cheek by jowl to what is a proposed development of industrial units. I think that they have a kind of industrial type of fence at the bottom of their gardens, a sort of galvanized steel sort of thing, that you can see through. Am I right? The sort of railings. That's their fence between. So those gardens have got that fence, and then there's proposed industrial units at the back of them. Is that right?
Yeah, I think there is that security tri-spike fencing.
Apart from being ugly, obviously, it also lets the sound in. Very, there's no buffer there between the either aesthetically or in terms of making, noise travelling. There is no buffer between the houses and the industrial units. Is that right?
Yeah, it would have limiting noise buffering effect.
Could I suggest that we make a condition that a tight hedge is planted at some point to increase or lessen the harm of building industrial units at what is essentially the back end of somebody's back garden, because that would then obviously be pleasing in terms of the people that are living there. It would also be better for biodiversity, and it would also somehow absorb the sound. Also, I would go on to say that I don't think 8 o'clock in the morning is at all unreasonable to have on a Saturday to have sound starting. I don't think 7 o'clock is at all reasonable, and I think we should put that condition in. Thank you.
I'm just going to check. There is a condition which secures a soft landscaping scheme already. I'm just going to check the details of that, and then I'll come back on that particular point.
Thank you. It will be Councillor Harish Bisnow Singh, and then Councillor Selby, and then Councillor Selby. So we'll just wait for the answer from Phil.
Yeah, there is some hedgerow planted to that eastern boundary, to the northern part. It doesn't run the entire length of that eastern boundary. Currently, the case officers recommended that landscaping scheme as submitted is secured by a compliance condition. It could be something, members may wish to consider further soft landscaping details by condition. However, we have to bear in mind that there is that extant permission on the site, and the current conditions are in line with these existing landscaping details. If members feel that strongly feel that the existing soft landscaping details aren't sufficient, then I think that is something that could be reasonable to request further details by condition. I don't think we can be explicit about what those details might be, but I think they can be sort of further details can be held back by condition. There may be reasons why it's not possible to plant more hedgerow along that boundary to do with ownership, the space within the site for the car parking spaces. But if members wished further consideration of that, then in my opinion, that is something that could be further requested by condition.
Thank you, Councillor Harish Presnell Singh.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. It's been very interesting, this with regard to the noise, but I'm going to throw a spanner in the works here. I would like some clarifications. Does these rules apply regionally? Because if you're saying that in Deepings, it is 7 o'clock in the morning, the noise level to be 55 dB. And then we got delivery in Stamford, it's 6 o'clock. So already arriving in the good Morrison's, Marks and Spencer's, and also Waitrose at 6 o'clock. So I don't know what it's like in Stamford. So is it a universal sort of a early morning delivery time, no matter which day of the week it is? Or is it each region has got its own different level, different time setting for that noise for delivery?
I think with this, because you've already given planning permission for a 7 o'clock start, that's where you're starting from.
Yeah, I mean, it's the sort of the usual answer of each application on its own merits, and there's guidance in terms of what are acceptable levels of noise, and that's generally, the starting point, and we consult with environmental protection around that. But there's always the consideration of context, how much noise is already happening within that environment, what's going alongside those properties in any case. And then the considerations, as we've already said, around what previous permissions have been granted on the site, and whether they can be implemented. So in this case, given there is an extant permission, that's something they could build out tomorrow with a set of conditions. Deviating from that becomes, quite a difficult thing to do. But there aren't any sort of, set of rules, if you like, around, what's acceptable in Stamford isn't acceptable in, in Deeping or vice versa. Each site and each application just needs to be assessed on its own merits.
Thank you. And I'll just ask Martha to reiterate again the legal side of the opening times.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chairman. It is to reiterate what Mr. Jordan said, there is a lot that has been assessed, like from your environmental protection officers. They are your experts on it, but also to add that obviously in terms of, I think the housing development was from 2016. Yeah, so then obviously that was considered then, and that site was assessed, then the 2020 permission for the 14 units will have been assessed in the context that it is next to, or potentially next to, a housing development that was granted consent in 2016. And that 2020 consent was granted approval with these time conditions on. So it was deemed acceptable at that time in the context of the housing development that could have been built next door. Therefore, now you've got a second, they're looking for an additional permission on the site to decide what they want to build out. That is considered a fallback, and they can implement that, as Mr. John said, tomorrow, for consistency with the rest of the site, as Councillor Selby asked questions on. The proposed times are based on your expert environmental protection officer's advice, context of the site location, history of the site, and the consistency. That it is considered a reasonable position to take, and I strongly urge members to really consider where this debate is going. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, and it's Councillor Selby next.
Thank you very much, Margaret. It's nice to see we're keeping Martha on her toes with this one. I've no problem with supporting any landscaping conditions if that's what the members wish to do with that. It's quite right that, as Phyllis said, you know, you judge each one on its merit, so you can't have a generalised starting time across the district or whatever. A question I've got is, and I don't know whether Martha can answer this question or anybody else can answer it. I mean, in my ward, I mean, we've got a few industrial units, but not many. There's low housing near it. We've got the Alma Park industrial estate in the ground with quite a few housing around it, and I know there's other areas in the. Do we, generally speaking, Madam Chairman, the question is, do we get really many complaints, you know, from the local residents? So it doesn't actually happen in my ward, but I don't know whether other members have. We, you know, get a lot of complaints from noise from industrial units. Is that a? Do we get many? In other words,
I don't believe we do.
Well, it may, but I'm just asking, generally speaking, do we?
Yeah, through you, Chair, I'm just trying to focus the discussion back onto this particular item. I know that might be a general query, but I don't think it's a fair one in this context. I think we need to concentrate on the proposal in front of us, the discussion with respect that we've already had on noise, and yeah, focus it on this particular circumstance.
Moving on from the noise.
Yeah, no, but happy to focus on noise, but in this specific context, I think obviously understand there's a keen debate there and discussion. I think the advice has been provided. I'd sort of reiterate as well, this proposal includes B2 uses as well, and there are some additional conditions to take account of those B2 uses and potential noise impacts from those uses when the end users are known. So hopefully that gives members some comfort that not only are there hours conditions, which have, you know, I won't go through it ad nauseum again, but obviously there's some technical sort of input there already, and that's the basis of the recommendation in front of us today. But also those additional provisions in terms of the B2 users, when they're known, there'll be some further noise assessment work to be submitted, to be approved. So hopefully that gives members some comfort. We have looked at this issue related to this particular proposal very carefully with technical consultees, and there's a suite of conditions there that hopefully address the noise issue in a reasonable way, and that's what we're deemed to be doing. There is the additional layer as well, as Mr. Jordan mentioned earlier, around other provisions in terms of should anything occur in future in terms of statutory nuisance. But in terms of the planning system, I think what we're putting forward in terms of recommendation today is a fairly robust set of conditions based on that technical input, but understand the concerns. But I think, you know, the recommendation is a reasonable one. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Councillor Stevens.
I would like to see some landscaping conditions be applied, if you seem to suggest that that's acceptable. I think that would, I think apart from anything else, it really is ugly, you know, I can't believe that I just cannot believe that we have built houses with industrial galvanized fencing at the bottom of the garden. Why have we done, what on earth has possessed us to do that? Who thought that was a good idea? I thought we had an urban planner in place. Who ever thought that we could stick something up and then expect people to live in them? I mean, I'm saying this now because there's no other forum for me to say it, but it's just not a good idea ever to put people in houses with galvanized fencing.
That is in the past, thank you. We can't
It's not in the
alter it.
far distant past. They're building them as we speak.
Yes,
so it's not
well,
very
it
far
is in the
ago.
past regarding planning here today. It is not the
Yeah.
issue today.
No,
Thank you
it's
very
not
much.
the issue.
No,
It's
it
not the
isn't.
issue,
So that's the
Councillor. It's
end of
not
it.
the
Thank
issue.
you.
No, it's not the issue.
No,
Councillor.
I am the chairman, thank you, and I have said that issue has been passed. We cannot alter that today. It is not a planning issue for today.
No,
That has already been.
It isn't a planning issue for today, councillor, but actually I'm on this committee today
Yes.
and I'm making that point.
Yes, and
Okay,
it has
thank you
been
very
made,
much.
thank you.
And moving on, I don't think moving the time from 7 o'clock until 8 o'clock on a Saturday morning is unreasonable. So I'd also like to see that conditioned. I don't know if anyone else would second that, but I think that's more than reasonable.
Yes. Yes, I would happily second that. I think earlier on I said I'm happy to propose this development. I'm happy with this development generally. The only thing I've stuck on is the people who are living in the house next door that we've just put them in that are potentially suffering noise. Now, I don't think that the applicant, if the applicant was here, it's a shame they're not, but if the applicant was here, I don't think probably we would be having this debate because they would probably take it on the chin and say, yes, 8 o'clock is reasonable to start making noise. I know that they can come back and they can challenge us at appeal and so on. I don't know if there's a mechanism by which we can go to the applicant with a potential kind of asking them if they would accept the condition of 8 o'clock. But if we need to have a proposal and a seconder to say shift it from 7 o'clock to 8 o'clock, we should do. And the reason is that if these are all historic things, if the rest of that I think it's called, is it Kestrel or if the rest of Spitfire Park was given permission from 7 o'clock in the morning, that would be because at the time it was built, it was in the middle of a field in open countryside. And now it isn't because we've built these houses. And the fact that we haven't picked it up along the way, neither the committee nor the officers have not realised that there are now families living literally within spitting distance of the potentially noisy factories at 7 o'clock in the morning. It's not I wasn't in the room at the time. I think that we should have realised at the time, and if we haven't, it's our own dark fault. But I don't think they will have. I'm not daring them to appeal because they'll go back to a tape and say, oh, Ashley Baxter dared us to appeal. But I don't think a responsible landlord would want his tenants to be making a nuisance of themselves at 7 o'clock in the morning. And I think they would probably welcome the 8 o'clock curfew, if that's the 8 o'clock start, because it would be a means by which they can nip it in the bud with the tenants by saying, sorry, if you're going to take on a garage or an angle grinding business in one of these units, you can't start your angle grinding until 8 o'clock on a Saturday morning. Sorry. And I think that anyone in the right mind would say that's reasonable. I can't imagine anyone in the right mind would say it is reasonable to allow noise at 55 decibels at the edge of the property would be reasonable at 7 o'clock on a Saturday morning in this particular location. But just before I finish, in terms of if a neighbour, if this happens, and the neighbour does complain and they go through our noise abatement people or whatever we call it these days and complain about a statutory nuisance, do we as an authority have the opportunity to say, yes, it is unreasonable in terms of a statutory nuisance that these people are making a load of din at 7:45 on a Saturday morning. Is it by a separate part of the law? Is it something that we could enforce if we wanted to?
Thank you. Martha?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. In terms of statutory nuisance and whether this would be a statutory nuisance or not at 7 o'clock in the morning at 55 decibels, your environmental protection officers have declared it will not be a statutory nuisance and that is an acceptable level, hence why it's conditioned to be no more than that. And I don't even think it is that on a Saturday, wasn't it? Isn't the 55 decibels the weekday level? Obviously, Mr. Jordan's just going to check, but regardless of whether it's 55 decibels or less on a Saturday, that is what your statutory technical consultee has advised, not just in respect of this application, but the 2020 application. And the 2020 application was considered in the context of the 2016 houses being in that location. So there has already been the consideration of with the houses there in respect to the 2020. And then now they are saying that still is fine. They will have looked at this, notwithstanding the history, they will have looked at this permission with fresh eyes and concluded that yes, it is reasonable, acceptable for it to be that level now. So actually, the statutory nuisance doesn't occur if they are 55 decibels or below at 7 o'clock in the morning. If they're, so it's only when they go above the 55 decibels that it's a statutory nuisance. But your expert officers have said 55 decibels at 7 o'clock in the morning is acceptable. You have no evidence to go against your statutory technical consultees, and that is what makes the changing the condition unreasonable and a very real risk of the council being awarded costs for being unreasonable, because even if you grant permission, they can appeal the imposition of that condition. And I reiterate, it has been considered in the context of the houses being there. I can't be clearer than that with you members in terms of my advice to you. I do agree that the landscaping condition is something to consider. There is perhaps some grounds to say, please, can you reconsider the boundary treatment? As Mr. Jordan says, they might come back and give a perfectly adequate planning reason as to why what they've proposed is all that they can propose, but we can at least ask them to reconsider it with a view to noise attenuation. But it will be for them to assess and come back to us, and we will consider that and sign off on it approvingly. But in terms of changing the condition of the hours of use, my advice to you is that we need to apply caution with amending it. Thank you, Madam Chairman. And obviously, Mr. Jordan's going to confirm about the sound levels.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's largely said everything there. I think the key point to me is that what the condition isn't saying at 7 o'clock in the morning you can start an angle grinder and make a lot of noise. The condition's saying that from 7 o'clock in the morning until 7 o'clock at night, you can't exceed 55 decibels. And that 55 decibel limit has been set as being, that's what's considered to be reasonable within that proximity to residential properties. So it's not, the minute, it's not like an operating hours condition that says, once you hit 7 o'clock in the morning, the business can just open and do what they want. It's actually a restriction on the amount of noise they can make between those hours, which is very different to just limiting when activity can take place. I think the point about the boundary treatment, it's quite a complicated site in that what's been said is right. This was a long-standing employment site and certainly predated any consideration of housing. And I think that, I suspect that tri-spike security fencing has always been there. The adjacent site was then allocated for housing. And so I think that the security fencing belongs to the industrial site. But the reason I'm saying I think it's, reasonable now to reconsider that boundary treatment is, effectively through the development of this site now, that security fencing could be reconsidered. It might still have to remain there, but the addition of a hedge or some soft landscaping could soften its impact and possibly help with the noise buffering. So I think that's why that particular point's reasonable. But yeah, I think the noise condition, it's that key point that it isn't 7 o'clock in the morning, you make a lot of noise. It's 7 o'clock in the morning, you cannot exceed 55 decibels, and 55 decibels is the recognized level for what's acceptable. Angle grinders, heavy industrial machinery, external plant, all of those things, they're going to significantly exceed 55 decibels and would be ruled out by that condition.
Thank you. And I think now, regarding noise, we're done on the noise one. Has anybody got any other questions? Thank you, Councillor Harish-Basnasing.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. There is a proposal on the table and it is seconded. I think that we should put that to a vote.
Thank you. So the proposal was, and are you still wishing to have it that it's a 8 o'clock start and with additional landscaping, or do you wish? Martha?
I think effectively Councillor Stevens, in proposing the apologies, I've lost my train of thought. I do apologize. The landscaping and the noise. You were proposing we approve the application subject to the addition of those conditions. That was then seconded by Councillor Baxter, again, that he was happy to approve the application subject to the two conditions. I think that is the only proposition that's been, I think we've had a proposition, didn't we have a first proposition by Councillor Baxter?
Sorry, Councillor Baxter said he had no opposition apart from the times, and that was at the beginning of the debate, wasn't it?
Okay, yes, apologies, yeah, just checking. So we have one proposition on the table, which is to approve it subject to the addition, an amendment to the landscaping condition and an amendment to the hours of use, but also obviously your case officer identified that we needed to update the use class condition as well. So if they could confirm that could be added into any proposition, it was, I think, condition 14 to just add class E into the permitted use classes. And then the only last thing I would have to say is obviously members have heard the advice in respect to the proposal on the table.
Thank you. So it will be one proposal with if you are happy with condition E being added with the additional landscaping, and you want to alter the time to 8 o'clock. So that is the proposal and that is seconded, correct?
Chair, sorry.
I'm just going to Councillor Selby and then I'll come to you quickly.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I don't have a problem with the landscaping, but I do with the time, and I was hoping these would be taken separately. Personally, I don't have a problem with getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning, 6 o'clock in the morning. That's not a problem for me. So,
okay. Thank you. I'll take some advice.
I say I'm one of these early birds. I like to be up and about, but I say I'd like to support landscaping, but I can't do them both together.
Right.
So
okay. Thank you. I'll just wait for.
If they can do separately, I'll be happy to.
Mr. Upton to give us some advice.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not sure whether it's advice or a comment or a query myself, just in terms of what's being proposed, whether in terms of the timings, 8 o'clock was referenced as Miss Rees and Phil Jordan have mentioned, as well as myself. Strong advice is different to that. Just to clarify, was that the 8 o'clock start reference, was that any particular subset of the week? I'm just clarifying that before you vote. I didn't know whether it was a common sort of 8 o'clock or whether it was the weekend. I wasn't quite sure. So that was Saturday. And then in terms of the landscaping, clearly, I've got the presentation back up. But there was already landscaping for the majority of the boundary in question, I think, looking at Mr. Jordan. Yeah, so it was whether the wording of the condition is to, notwithstanding the submitted details, maximise seek further details in terms of maximising the potential for screening, vegetative screening on whatever the relevant boundary is. Is that? I just wanted to provide that bit of clarity. Okay.
Thank you. So Martha, how are we going to do this one?
As I see it, Madam Chairman, we only have one proposition on the table, which is the condition to approve subject to the 3 amended conditions. It's your discretion, Chairman, whether you keep the debate going, and in keeping the debate going, another proposition could come forward, or you can pause the debate at this point and take a vote. Obviously, if that proposition fails, we'd have to continue with the debate and accept another proposition, which obviously would be different. So it's really your discretion, Madam Chairman, as to whether you halt because we've come to a pause in the debate to see how the land lies, or whether you continue and see if another proposition arises out of debate. And at that point, we then have to consider the order that propositions were made and what order we take the vote. But at the minute, you have one proposition proposed and seconded on the table.
Thank you. So Councillor Baxter next.
Can I make a suggestion to you, Chair? And that would be to perhaps take an indicative vote to find the mind of the committee on this noise issue. I mean, it might be that it just the Deepings councillors who are excited about the noise. I mean, I'll go with the committee's view on the noise. If we can get the committee's mind on the noise, and we get a yes or no, then I'd be happy to propose along with the mind of the committee. And surely that's possible to do it. So to do a vote on the noise and then a vote on the.
Thank you. Right, as advised, as there is only one proposition on the table at the minute, that is what we will go with. If it falls, or if it goes forward, if it falls, then we will continue the debate, and then hopefully somebody else will come up with a proposal, and then we will vote on that one.
Could I just say, it's not, I wouldn't suggest that we change the times over the whole week. It is just for Saturday morning that it should be 8 o'clock rather than 7 o'clock. So I'm just talking about 1 hour on one day a week, not the whole week. I think in a working week, 7 o'clock, absolutely fine. Saturday morning, 8 o'clock. I think that is reasonable. 1 hour. So we're talking about 1 hour, one day, not the whole week.
Thank you for that clarification.
We appreciate that, Councillor Stevens, but the officer's advice remains the same, regardless of the fact the clarification is 1 hour on one day. All the advice still stands that we strongly urge you to consider what you're doing with this proposal. Thank you.
Clarification as to what Councillor Stevens' proposition was. And Councillor Baxter is happy still to second that, would be preferable.
Right, here we go again. So, Councillor Judy Stevens, can you just clarify your proposition again, and you are happy with the inclusion of E1 of the, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. So my proposition was that we approve this application with the condition that the soft landscaping along the eastern boundary is extended preferably close bonded vegetation to act as a buffer to sound, preferably. I understand that that might not be possible, but some sort of elongation of that hedge along the eastern boundary, with as well the later clarification that you suggested of the E category having to come up to the committee should it be put in again. And the third thing was for 1 hour on a Saturday morning, 8 o'clock until noon is when the site should be operable at 55. Is it 55.5 decibels?
Yeah. Thank you very much for that clarification. Right, Councillor Baxter, are you happy to second that? Thank you. Then we will go for the vote. So all those in favour of that proposal, please raise your hands. We have four. Those against? 2, and those abstaining? 1. So the vote has carried. Thank you. We are just coming up to the 3 hours, so I suggest that now is a good time to have lunch, and that if everybody is happy, we will carry on after. Do we need to vote?
Yes, if they could just take.
Thank you. Proposer, do I have a second to carry on? Thank you very much. Do I have a vote? All happy? Good, thank you. So we will have lunch now and we will be back dead on 1:30, please. Thank you very much for your cooperation.
Chairman, can I just mention that there are sandwiches in the members' lounge for them? Okay.
Lovely, thank you very much. Did you all hear that? Grubs up.